Hello and welcome to week 11 in the psychology of personality. And the two chapters that we're taking on this week involve characters that I have been studying for decades. Most of my work in reading and teaching has been in developmental psych, and these characters are very important components of that particular perspective in psychology. So we're going to be looking at Erikson and Carl Jung. Now, both of these individuals were students of Sigmund Freud, and they broke away from Freud to develop their own particular slant on psychology. And despite them being developmental, they're really fundamentally personality theories, the development of self, the development of personality. And they lean largely on the work of Sigmund Freud, but significantly deviated from them. So in chapter 12, we're going to be looking at Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, kind of represented by this particular graphic right here. And what this represents is a sequence throughout a life path that begins right here in infancy. So we see that the progression of development moves around this cycle right here up until the end of life, okay? And each particular stage is identified with a decision or a conflict that has to happen. There's conflicts at each one. So the first one is trust versus mistrust. Second, autonomy versus shame and doubt, initiative versus guilt, and as they head into school, industry versus inferiority, into the adolescent identity, young adult intimacy versus isolation, middle adulthood generativity versus stagnation, and finally ego integrity versus despair. And actually a couple things here. There's a new stage right here called youth. And that's an emerging adulthood phase right there that's also included. It's not in this graphic because relatively speaking, it's a newer concept than at least, this particular graphic represents. So I want, for the quiz for chapter 12, I'm asking you to look at Erikson's model and tell me where you are and how you progressed through those different areas. You're going to be reading up on each one of the conflicts or each one of the struggles that is the purpose of that particular stage, and reflecting upon those experiences within the theory of Erikson. Now, the other theory that I introduce is the work of James Marcia. Now, James Marcia takes a dynamic view of identity. What I want you to think about is your identity as a jigsaw puzzle. You got all the pieces. Some of them are not made yet. Some of them were made for you, genetics, and all that stuff. So you're putting these pieces together. You don't have the cover of the box. So you don't have the knowing what it's going to look like. You have to start planning that throughout your life. Many of you may have large portions of your puzzle already done. Some of you, of course, are in school because you're still working on some of those puzzle pieces to build up the picture, the identity of who you are. Now, at any given point, those pieces are in a status. So Marcia introduces identity status theory. We have Erikson's identity development theory, and then you have a companion to that. At any single moment, pieces of your identity can be in a particular status. Now, each piece can only be in one status at a time, and there are aspects of our personality that are in each one of these four different statuses at any given time. We're not always in just one of them, obviously. Pieces of our identity are going to be in different places. So let's look at this graphic to kind of help us understand the dimensions that we're looking at are crisis and commitment. Now, crisis refers to, in that particular aspect of my identity, I'm still looking at the options. This is not crisis like I need an Ativan. This is crisis, I'm looking, I'm searching, I'm actively engaged in learning more about and structuring this part of my personality. On the other axis, we have commitment, and that's the presence or absence of a decision to essentially attach ourselves to a particular sense of our identity. If, at a given snapshot in our life, we have had the experience of both crisis and commitment for a part of our identity, we would call that identity achievement. If, however, we have commitment, but we've never really looked at the options, that we would call identity foreclosure. If, however, we are currently looking at things but you still haven't decided yet, we call that identity moratorium. And finally, if it's on the back burner, we haven't committed, we're not looking, we would call that identity diffusion. Now again, this refers to a specific part of our identity. Now, if we look at flippant aspects of my identity, such as what car do I drive? So we can examine this, just like if you think your car is a representation of your personality, it often is. So when you're looking for a car, let's take that idea and examine it through the lens of Marcia's theory to see where we could be at any given time. So let's say I don't need a car. I'm living in the city, don't want a car, not looking. I would say that my car identity is firmly in identity diffusion. However, let's say I wanted a car and I'm actively looking for them. I'm test driving, I'm looking online, I'm trying to figure out what, is cool for me to have, but I haven't picked on one yet. I haven't picked one there. That'd be an identity moratorium. My car identity would be in moratorium. Let's say, however, I'm looking for a car, but then I have a grandparent that passes away and I get the old Buick. Okay, it just gets thrust upon me. So here's a car. It came to me. I didn't really look at the options, but hey, I'll use it. It's great. Free car. That's fine. We might call that identity foreclosure. That would be a foreclosed car identity. And then finally, of course, if I've done my shopping, done all my research, looked around, picked the car that I want, I would be in car identity achievement. And you can see we can move through these at any given time. I might be in achievement, but then I look at the car and I find out that my financing won't cover it. Now I'm not out of achievement anymore. I've moved down here to identity moratorium. I then find out I can't get any financing. I can't afford a car. The car's not in the works right now. So here I go. I'm going to move from here into diffusion. Okay. Then I find out there's some used cars for sale. Let's go take a look at those. I move from here to here and I'm back in identity moratorium. I find a new car and lo and behold, I'm able to finally get back into identity achievement. You can see how my car identity moved from place to place. Now, car identity is not a really, really massively important part of my identity, but my career is, and my relationships are, and my hobbies, and my job, and you can take this and examine any dynamic aspect of your identity. Now, that's looking at one aspect of our identity and how it can move from status to status. At any given time, each one of us right now probably has parts of our identity that are in each one of these states right now. So there's parts of me that are achieved. There are parts of me currently looking, that'd be moratorium. There's things that are off on the back burner, I'm not thinking about them yet. And then of course there are things that are foreclosed. So I can say, for example, my gender identity is foreclosed. And it's not because I feel trapped in it. It's because I've never really had the need myself to question that. So I'm not unhappy because it's foreclosed, because it matches my experiences, matches my internal representation of who I am. So therefore, that's foreclosed. It probably won't move unless I wanted to explore an alternative gender. Now, my achieved aspects of my identity is my marriage. My marriage, I shopped around, dated different people, and then selected the person I wanted to marry, and that's it. I'm good for life. So I've made a commitment to that, but I did go through the process of looking and finding the right partner. Now, currently, right now, what am I? I'm looking at learning a new instrument, looking at learning how to play the harmonica. So I'm actively looking for a good quality harmonica, and I'm looking for a good book or a good online lesson to learn that. So being a harmonica player is currently in my moratorium identity. And then finally, my back burner is which retirement community do I want to live in? I am currently I'm not terribly far from retirement, but I'm certainly not looking nor deciding where I want to live after my retirement. So here, a snapshot of Dr. K is click, foreclosure. I have a foreclosed gender. I'm achieved in terms of my marriage. I am in moratorium in terms of my identity as a harmonica player, and I am in diffusion in terms of where I'm going to live after my retirement. That's what I'm asking you to do. Look at 4 different areas of your life, one in each one of those. So that's that will be the discussion. Chapter 12 discussion is to share that information with each other. Then we move to chapter 13, which is Carl Jung. We get into 2 concepts represented within Carl Jung's theory. One is achieving balance. That was a big part of what his theory was about. And then there's happenstance, which is actually talked about planned happenstance. Happenstance is an emerging theory in career development. So go ahead and look that up even beyond our resources now to look up at happenstance and career. There's all kinds of interesting work coming out about that. And, of course, the Myers-Briggs type inventory. And I'm going to tell you something. I became certified, as you probably know, over our spring break at KV, I became certified as a Myers-Briggs type indicator administrator. I'm going to not have you do that assignment because the online tests are not valid. And I learned why they're not valid. You can go and play with them, fine, but I am actually eliminating that assignment, the Chapter 13 assignment, to take the MBTI. You don't have to do that. That assignment has been deleted. If you ever have the opportunity to actually take the real Myers-Briggs and get the interpretation of it, I highly recommend it. There's a lot more to it than simply those letters that you get. I'm just going to a change of thought because I'm growing. I've been using that particular test for a really long time and finding it fun. I'm going to keep it right there. It's for fun. You can go take that test, learn about your personality, letters, but I don't want to refer to it as a Myers-Briggs. Actually, be sort of unethical now that I've signed the paper. And so maybe I'll be able to figure out a way to offer the actual Myers-Briggs within this course someday. It's a little prohibitively expensive to do that. But maybe I'll put it into the course, and it's like a $25 fee for each person to get the basic report, and then have a session in class to have you have me interpret it. Maybe I'll do that the next time I teach this class. But either way, learn about it. It's a great test. I didn't go get certified in it just for the fun of it. It's actually one of my favorite personality tests. And learn about it, but you do not have to do the Chapter 13 assignment. So this week, Chapter 12, we have a discussion and a quiz. And in Chapter 13, we have 2 discussions about 2 of the core ideas from Carl Jung. So, great chapters, great, interesting stuff. I think there's going to be some really good discussions on Erikson and getting some of the utility out of Carl Jung's particular approach to personality. So, wish you luck in all those, and I will see you in the discussion boards.